The morning sun spread across the tall glass towers of Vexen Industries, making them shine like silver blades cutting through the sky. Inside, people moved quickly, heels clicking, voices echoing, coffee cups clinking. It was a place of power, money, and pride. Everyone in that building knew where they stood. Executives walked with straight backs and sharp suits, and janitors stayed invisible. But that day, something changed when an old man walked in through the front doors. He was quiet, almost ghost-like, wearing a simple gray uniform and carrying a small bag with cleaning tools. His name was John Miller. He moved slowly but with purpose, his eyes calm, his steps steady. There was something about the way he looked around the place, not with wonder or fear, but like someone who had seen much more than shiny offices and busy people. He gave a small nod to the security guard, who barely looked up. On the top floor, the young CEO, Ethan Cole, was finishing his coffee. He was a man who had everything: money, looks, and power. But what he didn't have was patience or humility. To him, every person below his level was a tool, something to use and discard. When he saw the janitor entering his office for the first time, he frowned. John didn't speak. He just placed his cleaning cloth and started wiping the glass table with slow, careful movements. Ethan watched him, annoyed by the sound of the cloth moving. "Hey, old man," he said coldly. "Do that later." "I'm working." John stopped, looked at him once with calm eyes, then nodded and stepped back. That silence somehow irritated Ethan more. "You deaf or just slow?" the CEO said with a smirk. A few people in the room glanced awkwardly at each other, but John said nothing. He simply continued cleaning when Ethan finished his call. Later, when John bent down to pick up a fallen pen, Ethan chuckled loudly. "Careful, Grandpa. Don't break your back here. We don't pay for hospital bills." The room filled with quiet laughter from Ethan's assistants. John stood straight again, his face unreadable. His eyes, though calm, held something deep, something that made one of the guards look away. The hours passed, and John quietly moved through the halls. He cleaned, repaired, and organized things that others ignored. He never complained, never rested long, never joined anyone for lunch. Yet, there was something unusual about him. He moved with precision, every motion calculated. One day, a worker saw him lift a heavy box that normally needed 2 men. Another time, when a ladder slipped near him, John reacted fast, faster than anyone expected, and caught the falling man before he hit the floor. People started whispering. "He's strong for an old man. Did you see how fast he moved?" But no one dared to ask him anything. He just smiled politely and said, "Old habits." That night, long after everyone had left, the building was empty except for the janitorial staff. John was in the CEO's office again, cleaning the window. The city lights shimmered below, and the reflection of Ethan's award sparkled behind him. He looked at them quietly, his expression unreadable. His hand touched a small scar on his wrist, and for a second, his eyes turned distant, like a soldier remembering a battlefield. Then he shook his head slightly and went back to work. The next morning, Ethan entered his office early. He noticed the place was spotless, cleaner than he'd ever seen it. On his desk sat a neatly folded note, "Respect earns respect." Ethan frowned, looked around, and asked, "Who left this?" His secretary said softly, "Maybe the new janitor, sir." Ethan laughed. "The janitor? What does he know about respect?" He threw the paper into the trash and went back to his work. That same day, something unexpected happened. One of the new machines in the basement overheated. A young technician got trapped inside the maintenance chamber when the system malfunctioned. Fire alarms screamed through the building. Panic spread. Security called the fire department, but the heat sensors were already red. The door had jammed shut. People shouted, but no one dared to go near it. Then someone moved through the smoke, a dark figure walking calmly toward the chamber. It was John. Without hesitation, he grabbed a nearby steel rod and jammed it into the metal latch. Sparks flew as the metal bent under his strength. The crowd watched in disbelief. In one powerful motion, he forced the door open, lifted the unconscious technician, and carried him out on his shoulder. The alarm still blared, the air thick with smoke, but his face stayed calm, eyes sharp. When it was over, the emergency crew arrived and took the technician to safety. John disappeared before anyone could even thank him. Ethan watched the camera footage later that night. He leaned closer to the screen, eyes narrowing. That old man, he broke a steel door, he whispered to himself. The security guard nodded silently. Sir, that's what the camera shows. He didn't even flinch. For the first time, Ethan didn't laugh. He replayed the moment again. The janitor moved with speed, precision, and control, like someone trained for combat. But that didn't make sense. He was just a cleaner, right? That night, while most of the staff went home, Ethan stayed late. He stood near his office window, looking down at the city lights, lost in thought. Somewhere in the lower floors, John was cleaning silently, his reflection passing across the glass walls like a shadow. Ethan couldn't explain it, but something deep inside told him that man wasn't who he appeared to be. The next morning, the company was buzzing with talk about the hero janitor. Some called him brave, others strange. Ethan acted like he didn't care, but every time he saw the old man pass by with that same calm face, a strange unease grew inside him. He didn't know why, but he felt as if he was being quietly judged by someone who had already seen what real power looked like. And in John's quiet eyes, hidden behind years of silence and pain, there was something no one noticed, a soldier watching, waiting, and perhaps, protecting. The world thought he was a janitor. But the truth about John Miller was something that could shake this company to its core. And sooner or later, the arrogant CEO who mocked him would find out exactly who he really was. The next morning, the entire building buzzed with whispers about the fire incident. Employees gathered in corners, retelling the same story again and again, the janitor who broke a steel door and saved a man's life. Some said it was luck, others said it was impossible. But when John walked in quietly, pushing his cleaning cart as if nothing had happened, the noise stopped. People stared, but he just gave them a polite nod and went to work. On the top floor, CEO Ethan Cole wasn't smiling. He didn't like attention going anywhere but himself. He had spent years building a reputation as the man who ran everything, the man who controlled every success in the company. But now, for the first time, someone else had become the center of talk. A janitor. An old man. A man Ethan had mocked in front of everyone. When Ethan saw John later that day, he spoke loudly enough for everyone in the hall to hear. So, the hero janitor is back at work already, he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Did the army forget to call you for another mission? The employees glanced at each other, unsure whether to laugh. John stopped, looked at him once, then simply said, "Just doing my job, sir." Ethan smirked. "Oh, of course. Saving lives is part of your mop duty now, right?" He expected John to get angry, or embarrassed, or at least defend himself. But John just turned away and continued cleaning the floor. That calm silence made Ethan feel something he didn't understand, an irritation mixed with unease. Later, in a meeting with the board, Ethan brought up the topic. "We can't have staff creating drama," he said sharply. "That janitor caused chaos yesterday. Cameras everywhere. Employees distracted. I want him gone." The HR head hesitated. "Sir, he saved a worker's life. Firing him would look bad." Ethan's face hardened. "I don't care how it looks. He's a janitor, not a hero." As the meeting ended, one of the security supervisors quietly approached Ethan. "Sir, about that janitor." Ethan frowned. "What now?" The man looked nervous. "We checked the footage again. The way he moved, it's not normal. His reflexes, his posture, it's like military training. Real, professional kind. Ethan rolled his eyes. Don't tell me you think he's some secret agent hiding with a mop. The guard said nothing more, but the look in his eyes was uneasy. That evening, Ethan left the office late. He passed by the janitor's storage room and saw John sitting quietly, cleaning his tools. For a moment, Ethan watched him through the glass window. The man sat straight, movements sharp and precise, polishing a simple mop handle like a soldier cleaning a weapon. There was something strange about the discipline in that small motion. Ethan shook his head and walked away, forcing a laugh at his own imagination. The next morning, a new intern accidentally spilled coffee near Ethan's office door. Before anyone could react, John appeared from the corner, dropping to his knees, quickly soaking it up with a cloth before the coffee could touch the carpet. The intern whispered, "Thank you." John just nodded and said, "Be careful next time." Ethan stepped out right then, saw the scene, and sneered. "You enjoy cleaning up other people's messes, don't you?" John stood up and looked him in the eyes for the first time. "Someone has to," he said quietly. That answer burned Ethan more than an insult ever could. He turned and walked off, his face red with anger. He couldn't understand why this old man's calm words got under his skin. Maybe because they felt like truth, something he didn't want to hear. That night, a thunderstorm rolled over the city. Most of the employees had already gone home, but John stayed late, as always. He walked through the dark hallways, checking every floor, fixing what others forgot. When he reached the lobby, 2 men in black suits entered the building. The guard at the front desk froze. They weren't from the company. Their suits were military cut, and their movements were disciplined. John turned toward them. For a second, the lightning outside flashed, and their eyes met. One of the men gave a small nod, almost like a salute, then handed John a sealed envelope. No words were spoken. John took it, opened it, read the short message inside, and his face turned grave. He placed the paper in his pocket, gave them a respectful nod, and the men left as silently as they came. The next morning, John arrived early, cleaned every floor as usual, and then went to the HR office. "You wanted to see me?" he said calmly. The HR manager looked uncomfortable. "Yes, John. Mr. Cole wants to let you go. He said your services are no longer needed." John didn't seem surprised. He simply nodded. "Understood." The manager frowned. "You're not upset?" John smiled faintly. "People come and go. It's part of life." He packed his few belongings into a small bag and walked out. The entire staff went quiet as he passed by. Some whispered, some frowned, a few even looked angry. The man who had saved a life was being fired. Ethan watched from his glass office window, arms crossed. But when John stepped outside the building, Ethan noticed something strange through the glass. A black car was parked across the street, the same kind of car the men from last night drove. The back door opened. One of those men stepped out and opened the door for John, giving him the same small salute. John nodded once and got in. The car pulled away, disappearing into the rain. Ethan stood frozen by the window, a chill crawling down his spine. Who were those men? Why did they salute a janitor? Why did John leave so calmly, like someone who knew exactly what was coming next? He didn't have answers, only questions, and a growing sense that he had made a mistake he would soon regret. Something about that old man didn't fit in any normal story. And deep down, Ethan felt an uneasy truth: he hadn't fired an ordinary janitor. He had just pushed away someone dangerous, someone powerful, someone with a past he couldn't even imagine. That night, long after everyone had left, Ethan replayed the security footage again, watching John's calm face on the screen. The image froze, and Ethan stared at it, his reflection merging with the janitor's still eyes. He whispered to himself, "Who are you, John Miller?" And somewhere out there in the dark city, inside that black car, the man once mocked as a janitor opened the envelope again. Inside were 5 words that made his expression turn cold and serious. "They're coming for you, Captain." Rain poured over the city that night, washing the streets in silver streaks of water. Inside his high-rise office, Ethan Cole stood in front of the giant window, watching the reflection of lightning dance across the glass. But his eyes weren't focused on the storm, they were fixed on the paused image on his screen. A grainy frame from the security camera. The janitor's face. John Miller. Ethan zoomed in, staring at the faint mark visible just above John's wrist, a small tattoo, almost hidden under his sleeve. It wasn't random. It was an eagle with a sword through its talons, surrounded by a circle of stars. Ethan had seen it before. Years ago, in a news report about a classified military operation gone wrong. That mark belonged to a secret unit called Shadow Hawk Division, rumored to be made up of the most elite soldiers the world had ever seen. But that unit was supposed to have been wiped out. Every member listed as killed in action. Ethan's hand tightened on the edge of his desk. "No," he whispered. "It can't be him." But something deep inside told him it was. The next morning, he called one of his old college friends, Mark Davies, now working in government security. Ethan spoke carefully over the phone. "Mark, I need you to check a name for me. John Miller. Used to be in the Army, maybe Special Forces. I think there's something off about him." There was silence on the other end. Then Mark said quietly, "Where did you get that name?" "He was working for me. As a janitor. He left yesterday. I think he's from some classified program." "Maybe." "Stop talking, Ethan," Mark cut in. "If you're right, you shouldn't even be saying his name over a phone." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" Mark's voice dropped to a whisper. "If that man's who I think he is, you don't want to mess with him. He's not someone you fire. He's someone you thank for not letting you get caught in his world." The line went dead. Ethan sat there in stunned silence, his heart thumping in his chest. What kind of man had he been mocking all this time? Across the city, John Miller sat quietly in a small, dim apartment. The room was simple: 1 chair, 1 bed, 1 shelf. On the table in front of him lay the opened envelope. Inside was a single photo, blurred, taken from a satellite feed. It showed a man in a dark suit standing outside Vexen Industries. John's calm eyes studied the image for a long time. He knew that face. He whispered the name under his breath, Roth. The same man who once commanded the mercenaries that destroyed his unit. The same man who left his friends to die 10 years ago. And now Roth was here. Watching again. John stood, opened a small metal box under his bed, and took out a folded piece of fabric, a military patch with the same eagle and sword insignia. His fingers brushed over it like someone touching a ghost. Then he carefully placed it back and closed the box. Back at Vexen Industries, Ethan couldn't focus on anything. His company felt suddenly small, his problems meaningless. Every corner of his building now reminded him of the quiet janitor who had walked through it like a shadow. When the security chief entered his office, Ethan spoke quickly. "I want every file, every ID, every document on that man. Anything you can find." Hours later, the chief returned with a single sheet of paper and a nervous look. "Sir, there's nothing. No records. No background checks. The ID he used was clean but recently registered. Whoever he is, he doesn't exist in any system." Ethan felt a chill crawl up his spine. "That's impossible." The chief hesitated. "Sir, maybe it's not." That night, the building was quiet again. The janitorial team worked their usual shift, but something was different. A security guard noticed a strange signal flicker on the monitors, an unknown access code from an external device. Before he could react, the lights flickered once, and the system froze. Ethan's phone buzzed. A message appeared from an unknown number. Your company has something that belongs to us. And we're coming for it. Ethan felt a wave of fear rise in his chest. He ran to his office and called security, but before he could speak, another message appeared. You should have kept him. He stared at the screen, the meaning sinking in. John. Within the hour, the building went into lockdown. Security teams scrambled, checking every floor. But no one could find where the signal was coming from. Then one of the guards shouted through the radio, Sir. Movement detected on sublevel 3. Ethan rushed to the elevator, heart pounding. The doors opened to the dim, cold basement filled with humming machinery. The air smelled of oil and dust. And there, near the generator units, he saw it, an empty coffee cup and a cleaning cloth left behind. John's. Suddenly, something moved in the shadows. Ethan froze. A tall figure stepped into the faint light. It wasn't John. It was a man in a black tactical vest, his face covered. Behind him, several others emerged, armed, moving in complete silence. Ethan stumbled back. Who are you? The man spoke through a voice filter. We're here for what's ours. And since you sent him away, you'll deal with us instead. Ethan's breathing quickened. Sent who away? The man tilted his head slightly. The only man who could have stopped us. Gunfire erupted as the mercenaries stormed deeper into the basement, disabling alarms and cutting power. Ethan ran for the elevator, shaking, terrified. His phone slipped from his hand, falling onto the floor. As he reached the top floor, he collapsed into his chair, his face pale. The last words of the attacker echoed in his head, the only man who could have stopped us. Far across the city, John stood on a rooftop, the wind blowing against his worn jacket. He looked toward the glowing Vexen Tower, his expression cold and focused. He knew what was coming. Roth was moving again. And this time, the company wasn't the real target, it was him. John placed a small earpiece in his ear and spoke quietly into the night. They're making their move, he said. A calm female voice responded through static. Do you want extraction? He shook his head slowly. No. I started this years ago. I'll finish it now. Below, lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the city for a brief second. And in that flash, the face of a man once thought dead came alive again, a soldier hidden beneath the clothes of a janitor, ready to face the ghosts of his past. At that same moment, in his office, Ethan stared out the window, unaware that the storm outside was nothing compared to the one about to strike inside his walls. The storm came without warning. Thunder rolled across the city as dark clouds smothered the skyline. By midnight, the towers of Vexen Industries were just shadows, their bright lights dimmed by the sheets of rain hammering the glass. Most employees had gone home hours ago. Only a handful of night shift guards remained, watching monitors that flickered from the static of the storm. But something strange was happening on the lower floors. Cameras started losing signal one by one, like candles being blown out in a dark room. On the top floor, Ethan Cole leaned back in his chair, staring blankly at the city lights below. His thoughts kept circling back to John Miller, the old janitor with calm eyes and mysterious strength. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that mark, that tattoo, and the cold warning from his government friend echoing in his head, he's not someone you fire. Suddenly, the phone on his desk rang. It was the security control room. Sir, a nervous voice said, we're getting system interference. Multiple cameras just went offline. Ethan frowned. Probably the storm. No, sir, the guard replied quickly. This is different. Someone's bypassing the internal grid. Looks like hacking. Ethan sat upright. Hacking? Into my building? Yes, sir. We're trying to trace the signal. Wait, hold on, someone just triggered an emergency door override in the basement. Before Ethan could answer, the line went dead. In the dim light of the security room, the guards watched as the main power feed blinked out. Red emergency lights bathed the halls in a blood-colored glow. One of the men shouted, "We have intruders." The echo of boots hitting wet concrete followed seconds later. Then came the gunfire, short bursts, precise, professional. Ethan froze as the distant sounds reached him through the elevator shaft. His pulse raced. He grabbed his phone and called security again, no answer. He tried the police, but the signal was jammed. The storm outside roared louder, drowning out every sound except the pounding of his own heartbeat. The power flickered again, and then the elevator lights went dark. Ethan's office was plunged into a deep red glow from the emergency lights. The air felt heavy, charged. He reached for the small safe under his desk where he kept a handgun, just for show, he always said, but now his hands trembled as he held it. Then came the noise, footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate. The glass door to his office slid open, and a shadow stepped through. Ethan aimed the gun with shaking hands. "Stop! Who are you?" The figure stepped closer, revealing a face half covered by a black mask. The man's voice was cold, professional. "You shouldn't have let him go, Mr. Cole." Ethan's voice cracked. "Let who go?" "The janitor," the man said with a smirk. "You had a soldier cleaning your floors, and you threw him out. Now, no one can save you." Before Ethan could respond, a deafening crash came from behind the intruder. A dark blur moved through the doorway, fast as lightning. The attacker turned, but a heavy blow sent him sprawling to the floor. Ethan blinked, trying to understand what he was seeing. Standing in the doorway, drenched from the rain, was John Miller. His gray uniform was gone. He wore a black tactical jacket, his sleeves rolled up, revealing the eagle and sword tattoo clearly under the emergency light. His calm voice filled the room. "Get down, Ethan." Ethan didn't move, stunned. What are you doing here?" John didn't answer. He lifted the fallen attacker by the collar, looked him in the eyes, and said, "Who sent you?" The man spat at him. John's hand tightened slightly, not in anger, but control. "You've got 10 seconds before I make you wish you'd talked earlier." The man's arrogance faltered. "Wrath," he muttered. "We're here for the core drives. Top floor. Data vault." John dropped him to the floor and turned to Ethan. "They want your prototype files, the same ones that could destabilize the defense network if leaked." Ethan was still trying to catch up. "How do you know that?" "Because," John said quietly, checking his wrist communicator, "those files were never just business data. They were part of a defense system we designed 10 years ago. Before your company bought the rights from the government." A loud explosion shook the building, dust falling from the ceiling. Ethan stumbled. "They're blowing the doors open." John grabbed Ethan by the arm. "We move. Now." They rushed through the hallways, the red lights flickering overhead. The building's automated defense systems had gone offline. The sound of gunfire echoed from below. John moved with perfect calm, every step calculated, his eyes scanning corners before turning. Ethan followed, gasping for breath. You're military?" John replied simply. "Shadow Hawk Division." Ethan stopped for a second, his mind spinning. "That's impossible. That unit was wiped out." John gave a thin, humorless smile. "That's what they told the world." They reached the stairwell. John kicked open the door and motioned for Ethan to follow. Down below, flashlight beams cut through the darkness as armed men moved floor by floor. John crouched low, pressed his ear to the wall, and listened. 6 of them. Maybe more. "Can't we just call the police?" Ethan whispered. "They'll be too late," John said flatly. "And these men aren't afraid of sirens." The next few minutes felt like hours. John led Ethan through maintenance tunnels and storage corridors, avoiding the patrols. Twice, they nearly got caught. Once, Ethan slipped, and John pulled him back just as a beam of light passed inches away. Finally, they reached the data vault, a thick, reinforced door that could only be opened by Ethan's biometric ID. "Do it," John said, covering the hallway. Ethan pressed his thumb on the scanner, his hands trembling. The door hissed open, revealing a room filled with glowing blue servers and humming machinery. John entered first, scanning the shadows. "We'll hold here," he said. "They'll come." Moments later, the attack came. The door burst open with a flash grenade, blinding white light filling the room. Ethan ducked behind a console, ears ringing. But when the smoke cleared, he saw John moving like a ghost, fast, silent, efficient. He disarmed one attacker, threw another into a server rack, and fired a captured weapon without hesitation. The fight lasted less than 30 seconds. When it was over, the room was silent again, except for the sound of rain outside and the hum of the machines. Ethan looked around, stunned. "You just..." John turned, his face expressionless. "Saved your company. Again." Ethan swallowed hard. "Why? After everything I did to you, why help me?" John looked at him for a long moment. "Because those men weren't just after your data. They were after me. And now, because of your ego, you're caught in the middle of something you don't understand." Ethan didn't know what to say. The rain outside began to ease, but the danger inside the building was far from over. As John reloaded the weapon and checked the security feed, he spoke quietly, almost to himself. "Roth is back. He won't stop until he finds me." Ethan stepped closer. "Who's Roth?" John's eyes hardened. "The man who killed my team. The man you just invited into your company by firing me." Lightning flashed again, throwing their shadows across the wall. Ethan realized in that moment that the humble janitor he had mocked was gone. Standing before him was a man built for war, one who carried secrets that could destroy everything around him. And as the sound of distant footsteps echoed once more through the building, John lifted his weapon and said in a calm, chilling voice, "Stay behind me. The night isn't over yet." The morning after the attack, the city's skyline looked calm again, washed clean by the storm. But inside Vexen Industries, the tension was far from over. Emergency crews flooded the building, police, paramedics, and technicians all working under flickering lights and shattered glass. The media had been locked out, the company wanted silence. The fewer people who knew about what happened, the better. Ethan Cole stood near his office window, staring down at the street below. He looked exhausted. His usual confidence, the polished arrogance he wore like armor, was gone. His reflection looked hollow, haunted. Across the room, John Miller sat quietly, cleaning a deep cut on his forearm with calm precision. The janitor's uniform was gone, he wore a plain black shirt now, one that made the scars on his arms visible. Neither man had spoken for nearly an hour. The silence between them was heavy, full of things that needed to be said but neither dared to start. Finally, Ethan broke the quiet. "You could have killed them all, couldn't you?" His voice was soft, not accusatory, just curious. John didn't look up. "If I wanted to, you wouldn't be asking that question." Ethan turned toward him, studying the man he once thought was just a nobody sweeping floors. "Why are you even here, John? Why were you working for me? You're not some janitor. You're military, special forces. And not the regular kind." John tied off the bandage and finally looked up. His expression was unreadable. "I was done with that life," he said quietly. "Until last night proved it wasn't done with me." Ethan frowned. "You said that name. Roth. Who is he?" For a moment, John didn't answer. His gaze drifted toward the rain-streaked window, and his voice dropped lower. "Years ago, before I came here, I was part of an operation called Silent Veil. We weren't soldiers in the normal sense. We handled missions that couldn't exist, black sites, extractions, counterintelligence work. Our unit's name was Shadowhawk. Ethan nodded slowly. You said that before. The unit that supposedly died in a crash. John's jaw tightened. We didn't die. We were betrayed. Ethan froze. Betrayed? By who? John's tone darkened. A man named Victor Roth. He was our commanding officer. Cold, brilliant, ambitious. He sold us out for money and technology. We were sent to recover an AI prototype designed for deep combat learning. It could predict outcomes, simulate entire wars in seconds. But it was too dangerous. The government shut it down. Roth didn't agree. He took it, sold it to private buyers, and framed us for treason. My whole team was wiped out. Ethan leaned forward, his throat dry. And you survived. Barely, John said, his voice flat. I went underground. Changed my name. I thought I was safe. Until your company started working on a new defense algorithm, the same one Roth was after all those years ago. That's why I took the janitor job here. To keep an eye on it. Ethan's eyes widened. Wait, you mean my company's tech project is connected to that? John nodded slowly. The AI core you're developing isn't new. It's based on stolen military designs. You might not know it, but Roth does. That's why he sent his men here last night. Ethan's head spun. He felt his stomach twist with realization. The data vault, the attack, it wasn't about money or corporate sabotage. It was about finishing something deadly that began long before he even knew it existed. He turned back to John, his voice unsteady. So, what happens now? Are we in danger? John's expression hardened. Roth doesn't leave loose ends. He'll come again, bigger, faster, and meaner. And next time, he won't just come for data. He'll come for you. Because now, you know too much. Ethan swallowed, his mouth dry. Can't we call the authorities? The government? John gave a faint, humorless smile. You think the government can protect you from a man who used to run their black programs? No. This has to be handled differently. Ethan hesitated. Handled how? John stood up and strapped his wrist communicator back on. By ending what I should have finished years ago. At that moment, the door burst open. Sarah Lynn, Ethan's chief of security, stepped in. Her eyes widened at the sight of John, then shifted to Ethan. Sir, we found something in the basement during cleanup. You need to see it. They followed her down through the emergency stairwell to the lower levels. The air smelled like oil and burnt wires. In one of the damaged service rooms, a small metal case sat on a table. Inside was a sleek black device, about the size of a hand, covered in encrypted markings. Sarah crossed her arms. We found it hidden behind the generator panel. It wasn't part of our systems. John's expression darkened instantly. He stepped closer, studying the device. Then he cursed under his breath. Ethan frowned. What is it? It's a beacon, John said grimly. Encrypted signal, high frequency. That means. Before he could finish, the device started blinking red. A small, rhythmic pulse. Sarah took a step back. Is it a bomb? John shook his head slowly. Worse. It's a tracker. They know we're alive. A heavy silence filled the room. Ethan felt his heart drop as the light blinked faster. John turned toward him. You wanted the truth, Ethan? Here it is. Roth knows where we are. He's coming. Sarah's face went pale. How much time do we have? John glanced at the blinking light, then at his communicator. If my guess is right, less than an hour. Ethan's voice cracked. An hour? For what? John looked him dead in the eye. For war. He grabbed the beacon, ripped out its power core, and smashed it under his boot. Get your people out of here, Cole. The building's compromised. I'll buy you time. Ethan grabbed his arm. You can't face him alone. John's eyes, cold and calm, met his. You still don't understand who he is, or who I was. He turned toward the exit, his footsteps echoing through the hallway. Sarah called after him, "Where are you going?" To finish what started years ago, John said without looking back. If I don't, none of you will live to see another sunrise. As he disappeared into the storm outside, Ethan stood frozen, his heart racing with fear and guilt. The man he had once mocked and fired was walking straight into a fight that should never have existed, a war that had been buried under lies and shadows. And somewhere, far from the city, in a dark underground control room, Victor Roth smiled as a red dot blinked on his screen. He leaned forward and whispered, "So, the ghost still breathes." The game had begun again. The night was darker than usual, cold, heavy, silent. The kind of silence that felt like a warning before a storm. Miles outside the city, an abandoned military hangar stood hidden among the cliffs, forgotten by most and erased from every map. But deep inside that rusting structure, screens flickered to life, showing surveillance feeds, heat signatures, and the faint hum of encrypted communications. It was no ordinary hideout, it was Victor Roth's command base. Roth stood in front of a massive display wall, his gray hair slicked back, his eyes sharp like blades. The light from the monitors made his face look hollow, almost ghostly. He wore a tailored black coat, not a soldier's uniform, because Roth had never been just a soldier. He was a strategist, a manipulator, and above all, a man who believed control was power. His second-in-command, a lean woman named Vega, approached him. "Sir, the beacon signal went offline 20 minutes ago," she said, her voice steady but nervous. Roth didn't turn around. "Meaning?" "Meaning he found it," Vega replied. "And destroyed it." Roth smiled faintly, still staring at the glowing red dot blinking on the screen. "Of course he did. He always was too clever for traps." Vega hesitated. "You really think it's him? After all these years?" "Oh, it's him," Roth said softly. "The ghost of Shadow Hawk. I should have burned his body when I had the chance." He turned then, his gaze cold as ice. "Prepare the strike team. He'll come for me, and when he does, I'll be ready." Back in the city, the chaos at Vexen Industries hadn't calmed. Most employees had been sent home, security was doubled, and the police were still pretending it was just a corporate breach. But behind the scenes, Ethan Cole was living in fear. Every shadow outside his office window felt like danger waiting to happen. He hadn't slept. Every few minutes, he checked his phone, hoping for a message from John, but there was nothing. The silence was worse than any noise. Then, just before dawn, his office door opened. John Miller stepped inside, wearing a long black coat and carrying a small duffel bag. His face looked harder now, sharper, as if he'd stepped back into a world he thought he'd left behind. Ethan jumped to his feet. "Where the hell have you been? We thought you were." John cut him off. "No time. We need to move." Ethan frowned. "Move where?" John dropped the duffel bag on the desk. It landed with a heavy metallic thud. "I traced the signal. Roth's operating out of an old Shadow Hawk facility. He's rebuilding something, my guess is a new AI network. If he finishes it, every defense system in this country could be compromised." Ethan blinked, struggling to process his words. "You mean, he could control everything? The military, communications, even satellites?" John nodded grimly. "Yes. And he's close. Too close." Ethan rubbed his face, trying to steady his nerves. So what do you plan to do? John opened the bag, revealing an assortment of weapons, compact rifles, tactical gear, signal scramblers, and a black headset marked with an insignia Ethan didn't recognize. I plan to end this before he starts a war. Ethan stared at the weapons, then back at John. You're going alone? Yes. No, Ethan said sharply. You can't. That man wants you. He'll have an army waiting. John looked up, his eyes calm. Then I'll bring a storm. Before Ethan could argue, the sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway. Sarah Lynn entered, holding a small data pad. You'll need more than weapons, Miller, she said. I decrypted part of the device you destroyed. It had a location key embedded in it, a coordinate file. I ran it through old government archives. She's right, it's a Shadowhawk site. But it's not abandoned. John took the data pad and scanned the information. His jaw tightened. Project Orion, he muttered. He's trying to reactivate it. Ethan frowned. What is Project Orion? John hesitated. For a moment, he looked like a man caught between memories and nightmares. It was the contingency plan. A fail-safe system designed to predict global threats. But in the wrong hands, it becomes something else, a weapon that decides who lives and who dies. Ethan's voice dropped. And Roth wants that kind of power? John zipped the duffel bag shut. He doesn't want power. He wants control. Sarah crossed her arms. You can't just walk into his base, Miller. It's suicide. John gave a faint smirk. Good thing I've done that before. Ethan stepped forward, blocking the door. Then take me with you. John stopped cold. You? No. You said he's after my company, my technology. That means I'm part of this. I can help. John shook his head. This isn't your world. Ethan's voice hardened. It is now. The silence between them stretched. For the first time, John saw something different in Ethan, not arrogance, but determination. Finally, John sighed. Fine. But you do exactly as I say. One mistake, and we both die. Sarah handed John a small comms earpiece. If you're going to do this, you'll need eyes on the inside. I'll monitor from here. John nodded once. Then let's move. Hours later, a black SUV rolled across a deserted highway under a moonless sky. Ethan sat in the passenger seat, gripping the handle tightly. John drove without a word, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the low hum of the engine. After a long stretch, Ethan finally spoke. You really think he'll be there? John nodded. He'll be waiting for me. Why? Ethan asked quietly. John's voice was distant. Because he knows I'm the only one who can stop him. The GPS showed nothing ahead, just empty terrain, but John didn't need it. He remembered every mile of this place. The cliffs, the dirt road, the hidden entrance buried beneath tons of steel and rock. The ghosts of his past were buried here too. They arrived at a narrow clearing where the land dipped slightly. John parked the SUV and stepped out, the cool wind whipping through his hair. He scanned the horizon, then crouched and pressed his palm to the ground. A small vibration responded beneath his hand, metal beneath dirt. He smiled faintly. Found you. Ethan looked around nervously. What are we doing? John retrieved a compact device from his pocket and placed it on the ground. It emitted a faint blue glow, and within seconds, part of the earth shifted. The dirt fell away to reveal a hidden steel hatch. Ethan took a step back. You've got to be kidding me. John looked at him. Welcome to Shadowhawk's grave. He opened the hatch, and a ladder descended into darkness. Stay close, he said. And whatever happens, don't panic. They climbed down into the old facility. The walls were rusted, the lights long dead, but the faint hum of machines still echoed through the corridors. The deeper they went, the stronger the energy field felt, like the air itself was vibrating. Finally, they reached a large control chamber. Ethan's eyes widened. This place is still running? Roth rebuilt it, John said quietly. He's been using it for years. As if on cue, a voice crackled through the speakers. Calm, mocking, familiar. Welcome home, John. Ethan froze. John's expression didn't change. He looked up toward the camera. Roth. The voice laughed softly. You should have stayed dead, old friend. But you've always had a bad habit of surviving. John's voice was ice. This ends tonight. Oh, I agree, Roth said. But not the way you think. Suddenly, alarms blared. The doors slammed shut behind them. From hidden panels in the walls, drones emerged, sleek, black, armed. Their red eyes glowed in the dark like predators. Ethan backed away, terrified. John, what do we do? John drew his weapon and checked the chamber with steady hands. We fight. The first drone fired, sparks flying as bullets tore through the old metal walls. John moved like lightning, every motion precise. He fired, rolled, and struck, his aim never missing. Ethan ducked behind a console, shielding his head. It was chaos, explosions, light, metal clashing. But even through the storm of gunfire, John's expression stayed cold and focused. When the last drone fell, the lights dimmed again. Smoke filled the room. John stood still, breathing hard, his weapon low. Then Roth's voice came once more. Calm. Almost amused. You always were predictable, John. I didn't build this place to trap you. I built it to test you. John's jaw clenched. Then you failed. Oh no, Roth said. I learned exactly what I needed. I have your combat signature now. Every move, every reaction. The system has been recording. And soon, your skills, your instincts, will belong to me. The monitors came alive with streams of data, showing John's movements mapped in real time. Ethan's eyes widened in horror. He's copying you. John's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. Then I'll destroy his machine before he finishes. He turned toward the deeper tunnels, his steps echoing. Ethan followed, terrified but determined. Because somewhere ahead, behind walls of steel and shadows, waited Victor Roth, the man who betrayed the world. And the ghost who came back to stop him was finally walking into the lion's den. The night air inside the hidden facility smelled of oil and old metal. John moved through the dim corridors like a man who had walked these halls 100 times, each step measured, each breath steady. Ethan followed behind, his heart racing, trying to keep his fear from showing. The control room fight had proven one thing: Roth had rebuilt a monster here. The real danger now was not luck or hired guns. It was a machine that learned from death. They reached a narrow chamber where cables ran like vines across the ceiling. John set the duffel bag down and opened it. Inside were tools, spare batteries, and small devices that could scramble signals and blind cameras. He handed one to Ethan and showed him how to hold it. If you see a camera blink red, hit the button, John said. It will buy us 30 seconds. Ethan nodded, fingers trembling. He tried to steady his breathing and listen to John's voice, the same voice that had pulled him from fear to action the night the building was attacked. Sarah's voice came softly in Ethan's ear through the earpiece. I have eyes on a service shaft 3 clicks north of your position. There's a patrol coming down the main corridor. Her calm tone steadied them both. I'll reroute power to your floor's panels. You'll have less light, but more cover. John moved without hesitation, his body folding into shadow. He slipped through a narrow gap and disappeared. Ethan followed, feeling his shoes crush small pieces of broken metal underfoot. For the next hour they crept deeper. John taught Ethan how to listen for the smallest sounds, the faint hum that meant a moving drone, the soft breath of a man on watch. Each lesson was a new kind of truth for Ethan. The world was not always fixed in conference rooms and stock charts. It could be measured in footsteps and blood and honor. At one point, Ethan slipped on a wet patch and nearly fell. John's hand caught him and pulled him up so fast Ethan's breath hitched. "Eyes up," John murmured. "We survive with our heads on straight." They found a small group of technicians, men and women who had been forced to work for Roth, frightened and thin. John spoke to them gently, like he was speaking to old friends. He cut wires, whispered plans, and handed out a few scavenged weapons. "You don't have to run," he told them. "You can help stop this." Some nodded slowly, others shook their heads, too scared to move. Ethan watched how John treated them, with quiet respect, no grand speeches, only small acts that gave courage. The contrast between that and Ethan's old life of public praise struck him hard. As they moved through the deeper chambers, they found rows of server banks, cold, humming towers that stored data like hearts kept behind steel ribs. Screens flashed their movements back at them, line after line of numbers and code. Roth had built a copying algorithm that could learn a soldier's moves and simulate them in drones. That realization hit Ethan like a physical blow. "He's not just after your skills," Ethan said quietly. "He's making an army that can think like you." John did not answer at once. He knelt by one of the servers and placed his hand on the metal. "If he copies me," he said finally, "then I'll make sure there's nothing left for him to learn." He looked at Ethan with tired eyes that somehow still burned with purpose. "We shut it down. We break the core." Plans were made fast and simple. John would lead a small team through the maintenance corridor and reach the central core. Ethan and two of the braver technicians would create distractions along the satellite arrays while Sarah jammed outside signals to delay reinforcements. Each man and woman got a role. Nobody smiled. There was no bravado, only the thin iron of resolve. When they moved, it was like the sea-changing tide. Shadows became men, and the air filled with soft footfalls. They reached a locked service hatch 3 doors down from the core. John whispered, "Cover me," and worked quickly, hands moving with a skill that came from years of habit. The lock opened with a soft click. Inside, the path narrowed into a tunnel lit by a faint red glow. The hum grew louder, like a heartbeat in steel. They entered the core chamber and saw it all at once, a circular room lined with screens, each showing a live map of the world, lines of moving data like veins. In the center stood the core itself, a tower of glass and metal, throbbing with light. Technicians worked at consoles under watchful cameras. Roth's voice echoed in the room through hidden speakers, calm and cruel. "Welcome, John. You always make things interesting." John moved like a man with a ledger to close. He and the technicians split to the consoles. Ethan's hands shook again as he pulled open a terminal and tried to follow John's quick commands. "Find the replication module," John ordered quietly. "That's what copies me." Sweat beaded on Ethan's brow. He typed, his fingers clumsy, then found it, a set of routine calls that mirrored human micro-movements. If John's actions fed those calls, the system would learn to mimic him perfectly. Sarah's voice cut sharp through the earpiece. 3 minutes. They're en route. John's jaw tightened. Now. He placed a device on the core's base, a small pulse generator designed to fry circuits without making an explosion that would kill the people nearby. He set the timer and looked at Ethan. "When this goes, we move fast. Don't stop for anything." Ethan nodded. A sound like a distant storm grew louder. That was the arrival of Roth's reinforcements. Men in tactical gear moved through corridors, precision in their steps. On a screen above, Ethan saw a figure step into a camera frame, Victor Roth, calm and immaculate, watching them with the same cold smile. The generator finished its countdown. John hit the trigger. Lights blinked and the core shuddered. For a tense, suspended second, nothing happened. Then the servers began to die, one by one, their lights snuffing out like candles. The room filled with alarms, shrieks and red strobes. The technicians cheered quietly, then dashed for the maintenance tunnel. Roth's voice came, low and furious. "You think this ends with a few burned circuits?" He stepped into view, flanked by men with guns. "You cannot stop a machine once it learns to hunger." John turned, weapon ready. He didn't argue. He only moved. It was not just a fight of bullets now, it was a test of wills. Men clashed in the glow of dying screens. Ethan found himself in the sudden storm of violence, afraid, raw, and moving because John had taught him to. He fired, he ducked, he kept breathing. Amid the chaos, John found Roth. For a beat, two old ghosts stood face to face, betrayed and betrayer, each carrying the weight of lives lost. There was no shouting, only the cold fact of years between them. John's hand closed around Roth's collar. For a moment it seemed the world would tilt and end. But the struggle was not to kill. John had come to finish what was started, to stop a machine that turned men into patterns. He struck the core of Roth's plan, not with hate, but with an ugly, necessary force that made the servers scream and then fall silent. When the dust settled and the alarms echoed away, Ethan stood breathing hard, heart pounding like a drum. Around him, men and women who had once bowed to fear looked up with something like hope. John wiped blood from his brow, the lines on his face older, but calm. He looked at Ethan and said simply, "You did good." Ethan's voice cracked when he replied, "So did you." Outside, beyond the metal doors, the sky was beginning to brighten. Dawn was not peace yet, but it was a promise that the night had ended. And in that soft light, soldiers and survivors alike realized that the war they fought over had only shifted. The fight was not only with men, but with the ghosts of what men had built. John did not want praise. He only wanted the world to be quieter for a while, enough for a man to step out of the shadow and be seen for who he truly was. The night after the chaos, the CEO sat alone in his darkened office. The city lights glowed through the tall glass windows, but he didn't see them. His mind was heavy, replaying everything, the disrespect, the humiliation, and the truth that had shattered his pride. He thought of the janitor he had mocked, the man who turned out to be far more powerful than anyone he'd ever met. The same man who had saved his company, his employees, and perhaps his soul. The CEO ran a hand down his face, his reflection staring back at him in the glass. He no longer saw a man in control, he saw someone who had been taught a lesson he could never forget. Down in the quiet lobby, the janitor, David, was cleaning up the last traces of the mess left behind. The security guards nodded to him with a quiet respect that hadn't been there before. The office that once looked down on him now felt like a place of peace. But inside, David wasn't proud or satisfied. He had seen this before, men who believed power gave them the right to belittle others. In war, in life, it was always the same. He didn't hate the CEO. He pitied him. Because he knew what it took to change a man, and it wasn't money or success. It was humility. The next morning, the CEO walked down to the lobby, a place he had rarely stepped into. The employees stopped and stared as he approached David, who was wiping down the marble floor. "David," he said quietly, his voice shaking a little. "I owe you more than I can say." David turned, surprised to see him there. The CEO swallowed hard and continued, "You didn't just save my company. You saved me from myself." For a long moment, neither man spoke. The only sound was the quiet hum of the city waking up outside. David finally gave a small nod. "People make mistakes," he said simply. "It's what they do after that shows who they are." His words were calm, but they hit the CEO harder than any punishment could. He nodded, unable to meet David's eyes, then slowly walked away. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a boss, he felt like a man learning how to be decent again. Later that day, the CEO gathered his employees in the main hall. They were confused at first, expecting another lecture on numbers and performance. but what they got was different. He spoke about respect, about gratitude, about never judging people by their titles. A company, he said, is only as strong as the people who care enough to keep it standing, even the ones you never notice. The staff clapped softly, some even tearing up. They didn't know the whole story, but they could feel something had changed in their leader. As for David, he decided it was time to leave. His mission was never about revenge. It was about understanding, and giving one last lesson before walking away from a world that had forgotten what real strength was. He left his uniform folded neatly in the locker, the mop standing beside it like a soldier's rifle left after the final battle. No one saw him go. But weeks later, whenever the employees walked through the halls, they swore they could still feel his quiet presence, the man who had come and changed everything without saying much at all. Months passed. The company thrived under the CEO's new leadership. He treated everyone with respect, from top managers to the cafeteria staff. Sometimes, he'd pause in the hallway and look toward the janitor's closet, lost in thought. One day, a small envelope arrived at his desk. Inside was a photo, an old picture of soldiers standing together, one of them unmistakably David. On the back, a message was written in neat handwriting: "The greatest power is kindness. Never forget that." The CEO smiled faintly, a single tear slipping down his face. He placed the photo in a frame and set it on his desk where he could see it every day. Whenever things got difficult, he'd glance at it and remember the janitor who had taught him the most valuable lesson of his life, not through anger or revenge, but through quiet strength and humanity. And somewhere far away, in a small coastal town, David walked along the shore at sunset. He watched the waves roll in, the sky painted in gold and orange. He had served his time in war, and again in peace. Maybe this was his final mission, to remind the world that real heroes don't need recognition. They just need to do what's right, even when no one's watching. He smiled softly as the wind brushed past him. Somewhere in the distance, the city lights shimmered, and he knew, deep down, that one man had truly changed. Because sometimes, the greatest battles aren't fought with weapons. They're fought with humility, forgiveness, and the courage to do what's right.